Welcome to the Embodiment Podcast. This show is for you if you see the body as more than a brain taxi. It's for people interested in coming home to the body as a holistic aspect of who we are and how we live. Episodes contain practical tips, exercises you can take away, and interviews with specialists from around the world. I'm your host for today, Mark Walsh. On the show today, Niraj Naik. So he's the founder of Soma Breath, and I've heard him described as a legal drug dealer. So I think this could be interesting. I've been seeing sort of really cool stuff of his on Facebook and videos. People in Koh Phangan, where he is now, telling me about various kind of things there. So Niraj, welcome, man.
Absolute pleasure, man.
So let's hear a little bit about your story just to get into this. Like, how did you get interested in the body and breath and all this stuff you do now?
Great question, man. So I actually was an illegal drug dealer back at university. I used to run some pretty big raves back in the day, sold loads of marijuana and pills and all sorts, and had a time of my life for about 3 years, ran this huge event, 2,000 people every month. But it was a crazy lifestyle, super hedonistic. But what I loved about it was the community and bringing people together, like, you know, the music, and it was a drum and bass rave. You may be aware of the jungle and drum and bass, and it was awesome. But it was just such a bad lifestyle, like crazy, like parties, university. You know what it's like. So I ended up actually getting burnt out, and I lost this company I created, and ended up having to go back to finish my degree as a pharmacist. And I ended up becoming a pharmacist.
So you literally became a pharmacist?
Yeah. So I was actually a pharmacist. And it was really a shock to the system, like from being like this free spirit to then being in this cage in a pharmacy, dispensing pills, and just being in that NHS machine. It was like so soul destroying for like years. It was so hard to get out of it. I desperately wanted to get out of it. It wasn't what I was about. And I had quite a big nervous breakdown, and by sheer fate, somebody took me to a Tony Robbins event, kicking and screaming. Actually, I was like, that was the last thing I wanted to do, was to go to some guru.
It's very un-British, isn't it, Niraj, as well? There's something in our culture that just goes, oh, no, not that. Not all that jumping up and down. Not all that enthusiasm. I'm too cool for that school. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, yeah, and also admitting that there's something all right with you and you need to go and get it.
Right. That's maybe a blokey thing as well, isn't it? Like,
it's an ego thing.
I'm fine. I don't need improvement. I'm fine.
I don't need that shit, yeah. So, but I was actually very concerned with the whole healthcare system. I really had a big insight into the way the healthcare system works and how people get just shopping bags full of drugs, you know, every month, going away, feeling worse, not better, you know, every single month. So I did see there was a huge problem. And it was at the Tony Robbins event where I first time had somebody show that there is actually a way to optimize your health. Yeah. Using things like diet, even breathing and exercise and all that. So I was like, right, I'm going to test you guys out. I'm going to see if you're for real or for the shit. And I thought, in a pharmacy, I've got the perfect place to do that, because, you know, you're bombarded every day with sick people. So I found a way to give out information in the form of a healthy shopping list to the patient. So I had like a couple of minutes with them. So I kind of do some kind of NLP, you know, motivational speech from Tony Robbins, which seemed to work to get people to take action. And those who followed my advice went on and like got better. Like they came off their diabetic medication. You know, people who were suffering from like hypertension, their blood pressure was coming down, and doctors were calling me up, going, "Wow, what's going on? This is amazing. Keep doing this." And basically, what happened was the first job I had, I got fired from, because I wasn't selling Benylin anymore. I was telling people how to make their own cough mixtures using honey and lemon and natural ingredients and stuff like that. So it really pissed off, you know, the pharmacy chain, and they were looking for an excuse to get rid of me. In the end, they got rid of me. Right. I wanted to leave anyway, and I wrote a letter, a CV, put it on monster.com, all the reasons why I'll never be a pharmacist. why I hate this profession, why it's a bullshit thing. And what I was doing in the pharmacy that was actually working, I put up on Monster, didn't expect, anyone to take it seriously, but I ended up getting headhunted by Walmart, who desperately, they were like, your renegade ideas is what we want. This is great. And they were like begging me to go for an interview. So in the end, I was like, okay, I mean, you've obviously read my CV. You know that this is not what I want to do. But I went for the interview, and the manager was really open. He was like, what were you doing? And I was telling him how I was just changing people's diets and why any shopping lists. And I said, imagine if you had a website where you gave out healthy shopping lists to patients. It could be a huge thing. And in the end, that one thing led to another, and I ended up pitching they have this Dragon's Den style competition. I ended up pitching a concept, a business plan for Asda Walmart. In England, it's Asda, but they're owned by Walmart. To Peter Jones from Dragon's Den, the CEO of Asda, and another director. It was insane.
For listeners who are international, Dragon's Den's like the TV show where people come on and they pitch an idea, and these rich people decide to invest money or not. Yeah.
Yeah, but this company were like, it was quite cool that they did this, encourage entrepreneurial ideas, and that they actually promoted me to the head office to come up with this concept. And then I was like working in this corporate environment, and the corporate environment is really, really challenging. Like for somebody like me who wants to be a DJ, to be in this cubicle environment, and there's a hierarchy, right? So managers have more rights than the normal kind of.
It's a bit feudal, isn't it? There's sort of politics and there's like different layers of authority, and that's tricky if you're drawn to a more kind of free-spirited environment, for sure.
Yeah, and the directors are like dragons in a den. They have their own little kind of sanctuary. You have to book way in advance meetings with them and stuff. So I was the one who was actually like the teacher's pet, because I'd won this competition, and the director loved me, and he basically gave me this huge iMac. So everyone hated me up there. Like everyone was paranoid I was going to steal their jobs.
Chosen son. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, it was really, really like kind of a harsh kind of environment to work in. And 6 months into it, all the managers and a few directors ganged up on me. The director who actually hired me, he left to become like the president of Amazon or something. And so I was left with this crazy kind of hostile environment, and they basically shelved the idea. They said it was too renegade. That it was, you couldn't say that, you can't say that to patients, can't do this. And then 6 months into it, I got ulcerative colitis, this stress-related illness, like just hit me, and I was suddenly shitting blood, and that went into like shitting blood like 30-40 times a day, and I was housebound, and I just lost all my connection with spirit. I was like, I'm trying to do good in the world, and this is what happens, this is what I get. And, I lost all connection with God and all of this stuff. And I was just ready to surrender to the medical system. And the doctor said, there's no cure for this. You're going to have drugs for the rest of your life, or you're going to have surgery to get your colon removed. It was incredibly depressing. But they say God stands for gift of desperation. And literally I was like surrendering like to what was going to happen. I was about to start wearing nappies because I couldn't go out in public.
Yeah, sounds rough.
It was horrible. So by stroke of fate, a now very close friend of our family, she's a yoga teacher in the UK, called Swami Ambikananda. She said to me that you've got a gift here. If you can heal yourself from this illness, you'll be a great role model to others, especially with your tenacity and interest to help other people. So I was like, okay, I've got no other choice. I'm just going to listen to her. So I went down this path, which was pranayama, breathing techniques, combined with lifestyle change through Ayurvedic principles, and then some certain yoga techniques, and a few other little holistic things I did. So suddenly I started to get benefits. And then that led me into discovering certain Ayurvedic treatments like colostrum, which were powerful gut healers. And then I went deeper into pranayama and the science of the subconscious mind and how you can reprogram the operating system when it's become kind of corrupted and clear off viruses, thought viruses, programs that basically hold you down. And we really understood the somatic connection between thoughts and your muscle groups and your body and your hard disk, effectively, and your operating system. I really started to understand this relationship, and literally within a few months I was back to full health. And I really understood the power of music. That's when I went back into creativity. I was always into music, but when I became a pharmacist for 7 years, I kind of put it to one side.
Niraj, you're covering some really good ground. I kind of want to backtrack a little bit before we get to the music and the breathwork and what you're doing now. So you've just said a few interesting things I want to spend a bit of time on. So interestingly, quite a few guests have told me, often quietly, though legally they don't have to, actually, I've looked into it, that they used to deal drugs. And I did. And it's quite an interesting thing that a fair few people in our field, if we look at it as the somatic field generally, started out with this very, we come from materialistic culture. So if you go, well, I want to change my state, a material that does that, a chemical, is the very obvious thing. And what often people are left with is sometimes a lot of damage. Like, I'm in people in 12-step, I'm in 12-step programs, for example, or they get, some friends in jail, whatever, health issues. But then they also go, right, that wasn't great. That wasn't the answer. That didn't lead to well-being for me or for other people around me or my lifestyle. I remember constantly worrying about a knock on the door, the stress. And, at a certain point I went, this is too much, for my health, for my sanity, for my ethics. And, but then there's also sometimes this sort of like, well, actually, if I'm honest, there were people who I definitely helped, or people who opened a door to something, or you're at that rave and there's an oceanic feeling of oneness with everyone on the dance floor.
Spiritual, man. It's like church.
Or sitting with friends. And even if there's a chemical involved that might not be ideal, there might be a sense of connectedness. And people get this at the pub. Let's not forget that alcohol is a strong drug. People get that sense of being drunk with their friends at New Year's, some sense of love coming up. That I love you, man. Like, that's a joke that people say that, but it's like, wow, you're in touch with your love for other human beings. That if that were not associated with the problems with alcohol would be a beautiful thing. So it's interesting to me that this has been a path in for quite a few. Maybe it's also just that we're sort of innovative and entrepreneurial as well. There's, I remember working on a farm and it just being back-breaking, hard manual labor. And after my first day of farm work went, what's another way to earn money? So there's also that sort of entrepreneurial spirit that you have to be a bit entrepreneurial to do well in this field, don't you? It's not enough just to be good at what you do. We'll talk about that maybe later. So we've got any thoughts on sort of like that, what's often assumed as just a very bad thing, but does seem to have, it opens up altered states of consciousness, or alters up a sense that things can be different for people.
Yeah, well, one thing is to look at why are things considered bad or good, right? So why are drugs made illegal? And, if you go back into the history of like psychedelics and LSD, Timothy Leary, people like that, it was kind of an experiment to see whether what would happen when they legalized LSD for a little while. Timothy Leary goes onto TV and starts telling the world that they should all take LSD. As you put it in the water, it backfired on them to a certain degree. But, because when you alter consciousness, you see things in a different way. Yeah. And the unconscious mind is basically only able to perceive what it's been tuned to do. And that's based on your conditioning from a young age, from the first 7 years of your life to where it really happens. The books that you read and all of that stuff forms, and the school you go to, educational system, and the government, which is really governing the mind, is all geared up towards creating a type of person that fits into normal functioning society, which is really
nice
geared up.
Consumer, good citizen, and psychedelics definitely mixes that up, doesn't it? There's no way I'd be doing what I do now without early psychedelic experiences. They just gave me a flexibility of thinking and said, hey, is this school system you're in really the peak of human achievement? Is this really preparing you for what you want? Or, is this just a kind of social conditioning? And while it's sometimes overstated by people sitting around on couches, smoking weed and playing video games, I think there is a a case to be said, isn't there, for psychedelics particularly giving you a sense of something more than our conditioning?
Well, this is how now, so psychedelics are now a big field of, I have friends working in MAPS, working in legalizing things like MDMA, psilocybin for therapeutic use, especially in the UK right now. And the way it works is there's a part of the brain which is associated with the ego mind. It's called the default mode network. And it's what's created at a young age that basically keeps you in the realms of what you know. It's your sense of self, your identity. And this is formed through many layers of imprinting and conditioning. But what psychedelics do is they change your perception by quietening this area. The default mode network quiets down, and other areas of the brain awaken. And what this does is it allows you to see things in a different way, different perception. So, for example, like some people get very depressed because something happened in the past that created a trauma. Mm-hmm. And then what that's done is create a memory that's become a habitual way of thinking. Maybe they ruminate about that situation over and over again, or they have held this as a safety mechanism to prevent that trauma happening again. And over time, it can lead into stress, trauma, depression, things like that. But what psychedelics seem to do is to change your perception over that situation, especially if it's guided with a good facilitator, where it allows you to see that situation as a different way, in a different way. You know? So it was like, and you can have more forgiveness and compassion over events in the past. And that can be extremely healing and can change your state very fast from being depressed to like, actually, whoa, I'm free from that. Yeah. And that's why it's such a good tool in depression. But obviously, when it comes to like society, which is dependent on good factory workers who fit in a system, we don't want them to question what's going on, really. That's a nuisance. And actually, I think back in the 60s, when the economy was growing through consumerism at a very fast rate, they didn't want that. But nowadays, the world's changed so much. Yeah. We have so much access to information. Jobs are being replaced by robots. We don't need human robots anymore. We need more creative thinkers. I have a big, strong feeling. I mean, that's, cannabis is now legalized. Cannabis does the same thing. It's a mild psychedelic. I'm feeling now there's going to be a lot more governments being open to legalization.
Well, it's interesting. Our economy requires creativity now. Like there's a lot of people like me and you who make it, I realized the other day, my job is basically creating ideas under pressure.
Yeah.
Like I, on demand, under pressure, have to come up with novel marketing strategies, novel creative presentations, and that sort of factory way of thinking, which we were conditioned for. It's actually even in economic best interest now to have a whole bunch of people like me and you who are coming up with mad, I pay a lot of tax. The reason I pay a lot of tax is because I'm an entrepreneur and I have all these crazy ideas and some of them work. And then, so it's actually in government's best interest to have a good section of people like me and you who are kind of fairly free in our thoughts and constantly coming up with new stuff. So I think there is a different pressure than the 1950s when there was, less people on MacBooks in Thailand, with creative entrepreneurial ideas.
Yeah, and I actually think England is going to be very more focused around that entrepreneurship, and I think they're going to be a quite powerful force in Europe because they're breaking away from the old establishment. I'm not going to go into politics and Brexit and all that. Yeah. I think there's something to it. They want to be more like...
always come up with new ideas and fresh inventions, and there's a tradition of the eccentric British person, which will see much more conformity in France and Spain and other countries in Europe. And that sort of creative weirdness that's encouraged in Britain. People in Britain will say, I'm a bit weird, me. But in Russia, you would never say that. Like, no, exactly. It's the same word for good as in Russian.
Yes.
So I think there's something in that British mentality, the Dutch too, maybe, that will mean that we can innovate in a way that nice conformist countries like Sweden and, you know, other countries that might be economically developed, I don't think will be able to. Maybe that's just national prejudice, but
well, you just look at all the music scenes that are really popular in the world. They came from England originally,
and writers
or America. Yeah, so, you know, like that's art. You know, a lot of innovation in art and I hope that it goes in that direction. We did drive a lot of the artists out of London when things got so expensive. And they went to other countries, even like Berlin. Berlin's like a hotbed.
Berlin's super creative that way. Yeah. Okay, what the pharmacist thing's interesting. So what we call a chemist, what Americans call a pharmacy, is in Britain, this is a place where you have quite a lot of power in a way, because the NHS is so strained that people are ask pharmacists for advice. And it strikes me that there could be a chain of sort of semi-holistic pharmacists. And I think there's someone missing a trick with a business there.
This is going to happen.
I think they'll go and they say, yeah, here's your antibiotics, but you might want to look at this gut biome thing, and, you know, how's your exercise program, and here's a leaflet on breathing techniques, because a lot of that alternative stuff is relatively accepted now in the UK and even the NHS. You know, doctors prescribe meditation and exercise now.
Totally.
It's a little bit unsophisticated what they say about diet, but there's some. Actually, my wife from the Ukraine says that it's much more holistic in the Ukraine. Her doctor will say, well, you need to be having more sex, or you need to be eating more of this.
Really? Right.
Yeah. She says it's much more sort of lifestyle orientated.
Yeah.
And in Britain, it's like, you've got 3 minutes and here's your prescription. God help them. You know, poor doctors are so strained. And then this is where the pharmacists are putting some of the weight for doctors, and the NHS encouraging people to ask their pharmacist's advice, because they've actually got a bit of time and it takes a bit of pressure. So I think there is an opening for a slightly more holistic pharmacy, you know.
And that can only happen if we break away from being reliant on the NHS. The pharmacies right now are going through major trauma because the NHS is bankrupt and they keep pinching all of the profit margins on prescriptions. So the pharmacies are under a lot of pressure. And what that means is that they're now being bought up by big chains who are the only ones who can do this.
Because economies of scale.
So then what happens, everything becomes like cookie cutter. And unless we break away from the NHS and become more privatized, where we allow individual entrepreneurship, it's going to be really tough. So I know that Boots and things like they're trying to do it, but it's a mess. The NHS system is a real mess at the moment. So things have to change.
No one wants to say this.
Nobody wants to hear it.
No one wants to hear it because everybody loves free healthcare, and I get it, and I love the fact that I'm not going to die on the streets if I get ill, and I love the fact that my mum had operations that we couldn't afford in America and stuff like this. And also, no one wants to admit that despite the efforts of some really good people, the NHS is just groaning with inefficiency. And literally, my wife does a whole bunch of stuff in the Ukraine because she pays every year for the NHS. Even though she's paying taxes, she has to pay for the NHS on top of that because she's not a citizen. Wow. £1,000 a year. And she says even though she's paying for it, she says she can't be bothered with so many things. She says she'd rather go to the Ukraine, and in the Ukraine she can go and pay £50 and get like proper testing, blood tests for certain things. And it's like, I'm like, wow, there's someone that would rather use Ukrainian medical services than British ones. That's sort of medical tourism. Dentist there, but I went there for the dentist thinking it would be cheaper, and it wasn't only just cheaper; it was a lot better than my dentist in Britain. I was like, oh, this. It's not just cheaper; it's better. And there's economics to that, but that's sort of a sorry state of affairs, isn't it? When I'm flying to the Ukraine to see the dentist.
Yeah, exactly. And this is happening. Medical tourism is a big thing now, and people flying to Thailand even for dental surgery. India's a big place for it, where there's world-class doctors who are charging way less, and you don't have to wait for months and months.
I've got to wait a year and a half to see a specialist around a particular thing.
But I think a lot of this can be solved simply by charging. Everyone has to pay a little bit for each prescription they get. Even, I bet, if you just charge... to give you an example here, right?
What happens now? You have to pay for a prescription.
No, but a lot of people get all the drugs were free, right? They don't have to pay anything. But if everyone had to pay, like, just say £1 per item, everyone, there's no like, if you're over a certain age, whatever. People start giving a shit more about their health and getting off the drugs. Because I'll give you an example here in Koh Phangan, right? If I do a free workshop, right? Yeah. It gets rammed. Like, you have to turn 40, 50 people. You charge $200, which is £5 for entry. Yeah. Suddenly you've got like 80% of the people showing up. I mean, 80% less people showing up.
Same thing, but they're people.
As soon as there's a little, and the people who come have a much better time.
Yeah, I charge £10 for what I used to do for free workshops. So I've got a £10 online course and which is an evening, and a £10 Brighton training. Just you know what? I don't want to do free. I want people to at least put some money down. And even if someone's pretty skint, they've got
value in.
Yeah. So there's a
value in more,
isn't it? And it's
commitment. Yeah.
The idea I heard for the NHS is every time you get something, you should get a bill of what it would cost you in America.
Yeah.
So you go,
that's good.
Oh shit, that would have cost me £200. I saw a video on this of people, what did you do on the NHS? Say, I got some antibiotics and I got my doctor, and say, in America, that would have cost you £200. Just to see the doctor and get some antibiotics. And they're like, what? I got my prescription for £10. So it's like having people value that. Like every time an ambulance comes out, that costs £200, and people do it, got a cold, so it's like, need some way of valuing it that means that they use it wisely. But anyway, listen, we've drifted a bit here. This is interesting. I like the fact that you're not just like super left wing, or everything should be free, because there's no such thing as free.
No, not at all. I'm probably the opposite of that. Yeah.
Oh, careful! You'll get attacked. Easy, Niraj. Easy. You're not a Corbynite. You're how dare you?
I know. I'm a very controversial figure. I'm a total renegade. I don't believe in any of that politics.
You know what? There is orthodoxies, isn't there? There's an orthodoxy in school. There's an orthodoxy in pharmacy. But there's also an orthodoxy in alternative cultures, like everyone's supposed to be super left-wing. And it's like that. That's an orthodoxy. And it's like, well, I'm left about some things, I'm middle about others, and I'm a bit conservative about others because I've fucking thought about them. Like, if you thought about issues, you shouldn't be all left or all right or all centre, because it's different things.
The isms is what creates all the biggest problems in the world. Like the word is like a huge problem in the world, because when you make absolute truths and statements, it's when it turns into dogma and religion. And all those dogma peddlers, like being anything like extreme, like leftist, and disregarding what all of the right-wing people have achieved in the world, have helped in this world. And the same thing, being completely right-wing is dangerous, and it becomes fanatical and turns into a religion. And that's where the problem is. And we need to bring people more awareness. And that's what the point of the internet was, and things like that, for more awareness, more like enlightenment about things and seeing both sides of the argument. So I find it very hard to support any politician because they're so extreme in one direction.
Isn't it? It's tricky because they're an ism, and they're trying to. They're not really looking at things like, hey, why are people actually homeless? I would love to see someone really break that down and say, well, this is the issue, and this is this issue, the economics and the housing and immigration affects that. And like, why is that? Because I hate seeing homeless people, and I wish that they had a home, but I don't see anyone going. I'm just picking one issue here, like. I don't see anyone going, why is that actually happening, and breaking it down and really looking at it and doing studies and doing experiments. And it's coming from an ism. It's coming from either like one position or another that's pre-established. Yeah. That never helps because it's not in touch with reality.
Well, another ism that has become really popular right now is veganism. And the BBC have been making a lot of push towards veganism, which is just so unresponsible because, I'll give you my own example of this. So when I was a pharmacist and I became super like hippie, all right? And I became a vegan. And it was that point where I actually started getting the colitis, believe it or not. And it was being completely opposite, right? That actually saved me. I had to change my diet dramatically because I found that certain plants don't always want to be eaten. You can actually see that plants actually squeal, have an ultrasonic squeal. when they're about to
chemicals in to make them toxic as well, right?
Yeah, and the plants themselves have certain ingredients in the cell membranes that protects them from being eaten. It actually causes immune reactions in the gut of animals, including humans. And I started to learn about all this stuff from being sick. And it was going into a more meat, like beef diet, and having bone broth, and having colostrum, which was completely opposite of what Hindus believe. Hindus are like, oh, cows are holy, shouldn't eat cows. And
are you from Indian background? Is that your family background?
Yeah, Indian, Hindu. So I broke so many taboos in that time when I was trying to heal myself.
Your mum was not impressed when you turned up with steak and chips, yeah?
Yeah, well, no, I didn't have the chips because certain carbs, I couldn't, during that healing process, it was very weird diet.
But you found that what many people recommend, or maybe healthy from some people, just wasn't good for you. But there's
wasn't good for me, man.
But equally, there's dogma, right, as well. You should be eating meat, and that's the whole time. There's different dogmas out. Food is just nothing but dogmas.
So much. It's become so religious, food and diet. And this is why the media need to be more responsible, because the BBC going on this veganism slant at the moment, I think they're causing a lot of problems. I live in a hippie island full of vegans and ex-vegans, and there's a lot of people who come here, they become vegan, they go off and try it for a couple of months, and then they get sick, and then they have to go back to eating a little bit of meat. And I'm not saying you should all become carnivores. I'm not saying you should all eat beef or anything like that. And for some people, veganism is really good and it helps them. My business partner, in fact, he needs to be a vegan because he gets gout otherwise. Right? Yeah.
I actually only eat vegans. That's it's just the diet that I found works best for me. It's just and hamster milk. They're the only things I eat.
Nice.
So it's I'm on a pure vegan diet. It's
that's amazing. Know thyself is my mantra. Is know thyself. Everyone's individual. Everyone's different. Have compassion for everyone, because ultimately we're all unique. We're all different. We're all amazing, and we should all treat people with respect. The fact that they all need different things. And that was a problem in communism, man, making everyone the same. So this doesn't work.
This is spoken with a man who's marrying a Russian. You've heard some stories.
Oh man, yes. My girlfriend is very not communist now.
It's interesting when you speak to people from East European countries, they have quite a different take on where the left can. I'm researching Russian history, and I came across a thing called Cannibal Island yesterday, which was from the gulags, which is, talk about eating vegans. It was pretty unpleasant. And you see where isms can end up and how bad things can get when people dictate that there's, the evil people and the righteous people. And some of those are well known, like the Nazis, but there's a lot of other examples out there that are not so well known. So these isms can end up in some pretty dark places, can't they? And I think we need to nip them in the bud when we see them around things like food, or around things around the conference. People get very upset about certain speakers and this kind of thing. And I go, hang on, let's nip that in the bud, because I know where that story ends, and it ends on Cannibal Island. It ends in a bad place. Listen, I want to talk about breath with you, because this is your main. We're just talking shit about various subjects now. So, let's talk about your main area. So, what do you do now? You do these kind of conscious raves, breathwork seminars. I know you have online training. Give us a sense of what you do now. I've not yet been to one of your workshops.
Oh yeah, totally. So going back to the healing journey. So as I said, I got taught pranayama. The pranayama basically is this very ancient school of breathwork, breathing practices from India. But really, it's not just breathing; it's using postures, asanas. Pranayama literally means energy control. So it's the ability to harness the energy in the body and use it with an intention, right? So I learned these techniques to tap into the autonomic nervous system. The autonomic nervous system is the part of the nervous system that deals with all the functions that we take for granted: your heart rate, your digestion, immune system, all that kind of stuff. So using the breath is the one thing we have conscious control over, but also runs on autopilot.
Yeah.
So what that means is it's actually the tool to tap into your autonomic nervous system. And actually, the scientific dogma for a very long time has been that we can't influence the autonomic nervous system from our will, only using drugs or surgery or machines. Okay, that's the only way you can do it. Over the years, certain yogis have come over to America and stuff like that to try and prove scientists wrong. One of them was Swami Rama in the 70s, stopping his heart rate for like 10 seconds and changing the body temperature from one hand to another, things like that. And the way you do it is through using intention and breath techniques. Wim Hof is a very close friend of mine, quite a famous guy now. He came and he showed it under scientific studies, and it took him 30 years of being called a lunatic. But he eventually got scientists on his side who did some studies and showed that you can influence your autonomic nervous system. I proved all the doctors, that they were full of shit when I cured myself from an incurable condition, where the breath was the access point to doing it.
So what kind of stuff are you doing? Just let me jump in there. So I've Wim Hof. What are the kind of main techniques you're working with? Is it like hyperventilating type breathing, retentions? Like, give me a sense of it.
So basically, there's different breathing practices with different purposes in pranayama. When you breathe out, you stimulate the parasympathetic nervous system. When you breathe in, you stimulate the sympathetic nervous system. When you breathe in a rhythm, you balance the nervous system. Okay, and you can create this state called coherence. And music is great because with music you can time your breath exactly to the beat and breathe in a perfect rhythm, in and out. Right, so that's how you can make an effortless kind of breathing meditation using music. That's why I produce this music that does that. And so this coherent state is really good for balancing the nervous system. If you're feeling stressed, you're feeling anxious, if you've had a bad day and you want to just rebalance the nervous system, you can do that. If you're low energy because
like different drugs, right? So you've got your natural amphetamines and your natural weed and your natural, it's like okay, today I did a workout, so I did my Wim Hof breathing to give me some energy beforehand. Yeah. And then afterwards I wanted to chill out a little bit, so I did a sort of elongated breath. And I'm trying this particular rhythm right now using a metronome that someone's recommended me for vagal toning. Sindra, if you're out there, thank you. Beautiful Sindra. Yes. So I'm using a metronome rather than music. But I can imagine doing that. What I've seen, tell me if I'm wrong here, what I've seen of your workshops is you're doing it in a group, which itself you've got a communal element to state changing. Like that's much better than me doing it on my own because you're synchronizing with other people. You're adding an aesthetic element, like what you do looks kind of sexy and cool and beautiful, and there's music and there's visuals there, and that adds another element of balancing, like music and beautiful visuals, beautiful people, connection in a group, and the technique. It's like you're sort of hitting any of these will change.
Multi-dimensional.
Right. Yeah. So it's like just being an art, around
a rave.
It's a rave, right? But with the conscious breath work added in, because it strikes me that combination is more powerful than just looking at art or just being in a crowd of nice people or just doing breath work on my own like I did this morning. Is that the sort of idea that you're kind of hitting it multifactorially?
Totally. Well, Tantra, which is where all this stuff comes from, is all about expressing all the emotions and all the senses to the max while you're here on this planet. Like explore the emotions, explore the sense. So we tap into all the senses. We use essential oils for the smells. We use crazy psychedelic visuals if you have your eyes open. For the sight, we have the amazing acoustic sound and rhythms and all that for the auditory senses. Then we have kinesthetic senses. Some people use bodywork at the same time. So we combine everything together and affirmation and all this. Take people into a peak state, peak human experience, where reality kind of unfolds for you, like your true self unfolds. Like you have divine kind of experiences. It feels like you're having conversations with God and stuff. These are our ceremonies. Okay, so these are this ritual that we created is basically actually a revival of an ancient practice thousands of years ago that these ancient rishis, shamans, and shamans were basically like us, people like us who like to live in nature and get high and have a good time and speak to God and create wisdom and write books and, you know, just help humanity. You know, they were like people who were seeking altered states of consciousness to learn something, right? To connect to something. And back then, everyone was addicted to a psychedelic ritual called Soma. So Soma was this plant, and it's talked about 50,000 plus times in the Rig Veda. It's the world's most ancient religious manuscript, which became the foundation of like Hinduism and Tantra and all these things. But basically, what happened was at one point they were all addicted to Soma, and the Soma starts to run out, and they get so freaked out by being addicted to it that the god Indra orders everyone to go inward to discover how to create the Soma from within.
To jump in again, do you think that Soma really existed as a plant?
Yeah, I think it's a catch-all name for all psychedelics.
Okay, so you think that there was, you know, this was just them saying, look, there was psychedelics and people used them, but then at a certain point, the people said, you know what, we can do this through other methods rather than this physical method.
Yes, so that's when they discovered breathing techniques and practices, and that became the cornerstone of Tantra, pranayama, Ayurveda, and all of these practices were for when humans started to discover that we can actually make our own drugs from within, our own stuff from within, substances from within, without needing to rely on nature. And that's basically what I've revived as a practice now. And it seems to be working with amazing, profound results. So we had a scientist who did a study recently where he showed brain maps of people on psilocybin and people who've done Soma, and compared them and showed that we were making the same changes in the brain as somebody who was on psilocybin. So I was talking about the default mode network, quiting it down and creating a gamma wave brainwave frequency, which was predominant, which shows states of inspiration and heightened states of creativity and faster learning and being able to see things that you don't normally see when you're in a normal state. And they showed exactly the same after one dose of Soma, a daily dose, which is 22-minute session. So it was really cool.
So the last thing again is what?
We have a daily dose, which is a 22-minute breath
okay,
meditation.
So you have these peak events, like these rituals, and, you know, people have been doing that for thousands of years. It's a reboot, isn't it, of some classic human activities, you know. Kamela or whatever, you'll see plenty of those kind of, you know, music plus visuals plus people all together, you know. And then but you also give a daily practice. So there's this 20-minute kind of like daily, and it's, you know, some breath work that you do in the morning or whatever. Yeah,
that's right. And then we have other techniques for different purposes. So if you want to go to sleep, we have a sleep technique. So, you know, that's by turning on your parasympathetic. As I said, when you breathe out longer than you breathe in, you actually start to switch on the parasympathetic. Okay, and you can see this on a machine. You can watch yourself doing it. You can use a biofeedback tool like a Polar HRV chest strap and a Sweet Bee HRV app. You can actually measure, see your activity of the both sides. And just by breathing out for twice the length as you breathe in and doing it as a rhythm, you change to parasympathetic. And then using affirmations like, I command my subconscious mind to go into a deep sleep. Just saying that, you can just fall into sleep. And you don't need pills anymore. We have loads of people who've come off pills and sleeping pills.
You know, it's really
just by doing that.
Obvious to me that I've developed this set of tools, you know, some very similar, like I use these kind of ones you're talking about. And I just have a set of tools that I go, okay, I can use that to wake up. I can use that to relax. I can, you know, help myself calm down and get more connected to someone in this way. And like as an embodiment teacher, there's like a toolkit, you know what I mean?
Yes.
Of little quick wins and little hacks and, you know, longer term practices too. And I feel kind of sorry for now people that don't have those and they have to go take drugs that have side effects. I'm not against drugs, you know, there are times I'll take an antibiotic or whatever, but often I just don't need to take a lot of those drugs. And it's just much easier for me to do a 10-minute breathing thing than make an appointment with the doctor, go to the pharmacy, pay some money, come home, wait a week. Do you know what I mean? It's just a lot easier.
And it's free.
And it's free. Right, it's there. And I go, well, this is available to me. You know, I work with posture and breath and movement, and there's different ways. You know, we have yoga postures and things we work with too. And it's like, that once you've got that kind of toolkit, your need for a lot of the sort of normal things is really taken down.
Yes, indeed. That's the mission that we're trying to serve with Soma, man. Bring those tools.
You know, you talk about natural drug dealing. Now, something I've accused the sort of conscious dance scene of in the past is being a little bit state chasing. So there's a dark side to the sort of, and I'm glad you talked about a daily practice, because I see people that maybe go to 5 Rhythms once a week, or they, go to Copenhagen and they spend a week dancing in some crazy ecstatic workshop, and they basically get real high, and that doesn't actually change their life. They just get real high. They have an old state. In some ways, it's quite cruel because people see, oh my God, I can be another way. And they can't maintain that when they're back in their normal life. And not everyone lives on a tropical island, right? Like they're living in their normal life in Berlin or London or New York or wherever. And they can remember what it's like to go into an old state. Maybe they did mushrooms once. Maybe they had an ayahuasca ceremony. Maybe they did it dancing. But it's a state chasing. It can get, and I've definitely seen this in some of the more alternative places like Bali and Goa. People can become natural drug addicts just as much as they can become artificial drug addicts.
I think humans are addicts in general. I think we're addicted to something or other. Like, it could be TV, it could be reading the books, it could be working. A lot of people get addicted to working all the time. Yeah. And others get addicted to natural highs and chemical highs, and some people get addicted to all of that. And I think it's a human tendency to get addicted to something. And my way to deal with it, because I have a very addictive personality, is try and channel your addiction into something that is healthy and going to be productive. Yes, and go deep into it. Like revel in it. Like, do it to the max. Don't fuck around. Like, if you're going to get addicted, go into that ecstatic dance or whatever, and do it to the frigging max and see what comes out of it. And quite often, I'm not against anyone going down the other drug path, but if you're going to do something, do it to the max, to the point where you learn something from it. I do have this mantra sometimes, and this is why I'm a little bit of a renegade, and maybe why I'm quite close with Wim, people like Wim Hof, and that is, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Right. And I do think as well that society has become a bit too weak and soft as well. That's we are trying to protect everyone.
Yeah. It's not just everyone celebrates week. Celebrates week. It's a taboo. If you start talking about, someone said, "What do you think of that person?" I said, "I think they're weak," and people got really upset. And this person they were physically, mentally, and emotionally weak. Yes. And I didn't trust them as a result. I said, you know what, that might not be their fault. We're not doing any victim blaming before that religion comes out. It was just like, look, this person's weak, so I don't trust them. And people got really upset with me, like I'd sort of somehow broken a taboo. And I go, so it's not just that we're becoming soft, and this is very apparent if you hang out with East Europeans, for example. It's very, I think if we met some of our ancestors, we'd be quite horrified how much tougher and stronger they would be than us. I think we'd be embarrassed that, how modern life with all its comforts has made us weak. And, it's funny to me, we need to expose ourselves to hardship, like cold showers, hard exercise, or I see people in the gym doing the equivalent of the work that I tried to get away from on farms in East Anglia. They're doing manual labor and paying money for it, like hitting things with hammers and jumping up and down. They go, that's what I used to do, but for money. And it's you know what I mean? Like, if you worked on a farm, that's just daily life, And we're having to. It's a very strange situation in modern life. We've solved all these problems, made ourselves so comfortable that itself has become a problem. And then we've become very weak as a result, and and it's quite difficult to say, you know what, I'm going to get up early and do my kettlebell workout and my cold showers before I do an interview with you, when I could just lay in bed. What I mean? Like, that's a certain kind of personality that was going to do that. And most people just go, oh, fuck it, I'll have on my duvet a bit more,
Yeah. Well, good on you, man, for doing that.
What motivates some people, some of us? Are we just masochistic? Is it some sort of macho thing? Why do some people seek the hardship that makes them strong, as opposed to simply settling for the comfortable life?
I think society is just made us so comfortable, man. Like, we have anything we want at a touch of a button, you know? Yeah. We complain when that thing hasn't arrived, you know, within 30 minutes. Yeah, Uber's late, or we moan about stuff that, like, 10 years ago we would have thought was magic, like something in Star Trek. And we become more and more, unfortunately, ungrateful as a society, purely because we're so it's so easy. We've got it so fucking good. And it's only until you go to other parts of the world and you start seeing how people live with very little, with more hardship, and then being still happy and resilient and good, that you start to realize, holy shit, actually I start being more grateful, you know. And this is the one thing we're really all about, is gratitude, because the only way we can really step up is to first be grateful for what we have already. And, you know, I know some people have got really harsh backgrounds, they've been through all kinds of shit, all kinds of trauma, and, you know, I know for some people it's really tough. But one of my best friends is a psychiatrist, and he always used to say to me, when I was having a really shit time, he'd be like, let me just tell you a story of somebody I just sectioned today. And he'd be like, you know, I had to go to somebody's house where the woman turned up, and her husband had shot 3 kids and hung himself. And she saw that, and I had to section her, unfortunately. So, you know, your life's pretty good, so stop fucking moaning. You know, and that would, like, put everything into perspective.
Right. Back to cannibal. I'm not in Siberia running with criminal gangs trying to eat me. Yeah, this is... It's useful. You know, I lived in Ethiopia for a while, and it definitely gave me a perspective on things. You know, actually, Ethiopia is more developed now. This was a while back, and I went, okay, you know, there's definitely harsher situations to be in, and that is a reminder. I think it almost should be mandatory that anyone from our sort of privileged culture has to spend a year working in sub-Saharan Africa or somewhere.
Yes,
like as a national service, just so you come back and go, God, we're so fucking lucky. You know, like, you know, I've been to Afghanistan and Sierra Leone and places where there wasn't infrastructure, or there was real risk of violence as soon as you left the door.
Yeah,
I don't really need to worry about that in Brighton. I'm not looking over my shoulder. I'm not worried about my wife walking home from work at 4 a.m. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's like that's a hell of a luxury that most
such a luxury.
Worried about. I'm not only am I not worried about where my next meal's coming from, I'm worried that I might be eating too much. You know, it's like a hell of a first world problem. So it's useful to remember. And how does that fit with this sort of God realm existence in places like Bali and Koh Phangan and Goa? Because there's a whole subculture now of people like us who are embodiment teachers, breath workers, who, you know, I was just telling you before this, like several of my Russian colleagues are actually on Koh Phangan at the moment, and there's a bunch in Bali. I just got invited to teach in Bali for a month next year, and I'm like, do I want to do it? Like, there's a whole subculture, isn't there, in these kind of tropical paradises of Western virtual workers from body-mind backgrounds. What's that like? Is it just...
Well, yeah, there is a lot of different kind of modalities. People, you know, who've maybe done like an online course and stuff, and then suddenly become a guru. There's a lot of that. But what I've also noticed is that there's a lot of very innovative people, like very creative, amazing artists coming together. There's a lot of very good humans, man, like who wanted to break away from the corporate world, the system, and they may have had that background, and they're doing incredible work, you know, like in places like Bali, Koh Phangan. There's a lot of also kind of shady, like fake shaman people who take advantage and stuff. You got it all, man. So I couldn't, like, I don't want to like make any kind of generalizations.
There's a real mix. I saw some really high quality stuff being done in Bali, for example, by people that had obviously been in this crucible of creativity for a long time, meeting people from around the world, having access fairly cheaply to very high level teachings and different perspectives. I also met some Trustafarians, you know, and some sort of fake kind of weird hippie types that I just went, oh, that just feels really fake to me. Too much air element, you know?
Yeah, there's a lot of dogmatism. There's extreme amounts of veganism, and it's mostly the people who are very obsessed with food. who tend
That's
to
a
be
bad sign, isn't it? If I meet anyone I don't mind when I meet vegans. I don't mind when I meet paleo people. But if they, sometimes I make a joke if I meet a vegan and I find out after a few hours they're a vegan. I say, no, I didn't know you were vegan. I've known you for 3 hours. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
It's like I can be friends with those kind of vegans, but when I know within 3 minutes they're a vegan or a paleo person or gluten-free, hey Sindra, or whatever, I sort of go, that's a warning sign, isn't it? When someone's so obsessed with food.
So too obsessed with food, and then that's usually a sign that they're just religious. If they were like born in a different place, they would have been a strict devout Catholic priest or something. Yeah. So there's always going to be fanatical people, man. It's really hard to shift that. But what we try to do with Soma is like bring it back to that's why I don't teach one technique and say that's the only thing you need. This bullshit. We have many different techniques. We have different uses for different things, and we also don't say that this is the only way at all.
Correct.
This is all you need to do. No. We're really open to, and if something comes across that is a really good course or a trainer, or anything, you bring them into the community as a teacher. But what I'm really about is building. I'm quite selfish. I like to be around people like me who are on my wavelength, who I can hang out with and make music with or dance or whatever. And my selfish thing is to spread that as far as I can possibly go, because I just think that's going to make wherever I live a better place. So we're doing that. We're building like a community. We have like regular events going on.
You're there full time, are you, in Copenhagen?
No. I travel around the world now. And we train instructors as well. So we teach people how to deliver these experiences, and then we have different types of teaching that take you into different areas, like different techniques, like the understanding about the diet, energy types, exercise, all this stuff, like from an Ayurvedic and pranayama perspective, and we also have yoga, medical understanding of yoga from doctors. So it's like we're not just going down one guru's idea of what a holistic practice should be. We have a cross section of different modalities and techniques, and what I've done is looked at what has got the most scientific evidence, what really works, and we test it out, and then we use that. And a lot of it's stuff that's tested on me and then on our people in our community that's shown really amazing results, and then we introduce that, and we have this like very amazing kind of community in terms of people sharing things that are working for them. We have a lot of feedback coming from that, so we know how to improve whatever we do, and we never ever want to be dogmatic. One of my favorite humans that ever existed is Timothy Leary and Robert Anton Wilson, and he wrote a book called Prometheus Rising, which I recommend everyone reads. And I go by a lot of his philosophy of understanding where does dogma come from, and how not to become a victim of that, and how to awaken out of the sleeping trance that we're created in through all the conditioning, to understanding more of what's going on in reality by looking at both sides of everything and understanding things from different perspectives. Yeah, that's what we're trying to encourage with what we do with Soma.
I think this is a new kind of way of doing embodiment, which is, and is very much aligned with my own take on it, which is non-dogmatic. It's using what works, and it's also experimenting with things. I got this from Lyndon, one of my teachers, who's very sort of scientifically orientated, and it's looking at research, but it's also trying things, because you can't always do a double blind scientific study, right? So
science can also become dogmatic as well.
Right, like scientism. Yeah. But you try things in your community, you try things on yourself, you see that what works for you also works for others, because sometimes that's not the case. Yeah. And this non-dogmatic community-based approach, I think, is going to be one of the things that, as there's so much good stuff available, particularly in places like Brighton and where you are, Berlin, people have to have these non-dogmatic approaches. Because I don't know about you, but I find students now, I just looked at your video and I actually recognize one of the people on there who I know is a pretty high-level intimacy teacher, Rachel. And you've got, you get, like me, you attract students who are not noobs. They're not complete beginners. They're people who know some stuff. So if you hit them with like, this is the one true way, they're just like, yeah, fuck off, because I've been doing something else for 20 years. And they know that been here for 20 years has value. Yeah. It's not like in the 50s or 60s when a yoga teacher could come over for India to Britain and no one had ever heard of what they were doing. Now people have got reference points, which is sophisticated, and you can't just say this is the one way at people, because they've got too
people
much.
Still do that though. Like in Copenhagen and Bali, there are like cults, that's how you form a cult. It's like, this is the only way you do this. It's the direct route to ascension, to enlightenment. Which really involves sleeping with the guru. And, there's a very famous school on this island called Agama, which has had a lot of bad press recently.
Right, yeah, I heard that, yeah.
The guy was saying that the only way for women to reach enlightenment is to have sex with them. So,
how convenient. Well, I'm assuming you have ethical standards around non-sleeping with students. So I do see a really good challenge coming in ethically around some of these things now. So I feel like sometimes these tropical islands or, hideaways, it's almost like people hiding away, and some of the ethical stuff is now starting to reach Bali and Thailand and Goa, and people are also bringing different things with them, like standards of consent, for example, that are now much more common amongst young people who are dating for the first time, developing that consent culture, which is really, if you're a student at Sussex University, for example, you're pretty clued up about that. So if you then go to India afterwards, you'd already have quite a strong set of opinions about, okay, this certain things are not okay, which I think my generation didn't have. So we were just blindly. I went to martial arts training, and I look back on it and go, some of that was abusive. I didn't really consent for that. Some of that was not really okay, the training I had. And I suspect a sort of millennial, for their faults, would actually just fairly quickly go, this is not cool. I didn't agree to this. And for all the annoyingness of that generation, I think there is something really positive that's come through there.
Yeah. People are waking up now, man. They're starting to think more for themselves. That's what I'm really all about, is help people to think for themselves,
Listen, just to wrap up here, there's one more thing I wanted to ask you about, was kind of the business side of this. I mean, I can tell you're business savvy. I came across you on Facebook through slick videos and adverts. And, I can see from your site you offer kind of online trainings and different things, and sometimes that's looked down on. It was almost too slick for me, and I can imagine some people finding it kind of like, this guy's a businessman, that's bad. That's not my worldview, but I can see some people would definitely have that. And also, it's quite rare. Like, you and I are two of the only British people I know who have founded systems and branded it and got logos. And I've got an online training for my embodied yoga tools, for example. And it's pretty rare amongst Europeans generally, I would say. So maybe you could talk a little bit about before we wrap up, about the business side of what you do.
Okay, so I love to give stories, because every reason why somebody does something or becomes good at something is usually as a result of something that happened to them. And for me, so I used to run raves, right? So I was always a little bit entrepreneurial. However, back then, to organize a rave, you'd have 60,000 flyers. You'd have thousands of posters all over.
Big thing.
Right? It was crazy. Now you have Facebook, okay, so you don't need that shit. But in between that time, I ended up getting the Astoria in London. I don't know if you know the Astoria. Very famous venue. And I was actually going to do the closing party, because it was going to get shut down. But what happened was they changed the date. They weren't going to shut it down anymore. And this event was still supposed to go on. And basically, my friend who I was doing it with, he was obsessed with The Secret, and he was all about positive thinking. And I was like, I don't think this thing's going to be successful, because the whole point why we were going to have loads of people is the last ever event. And he was like, no, think positive. And he was all obsessed with The Secret, all this bullshit. So I went along with it, and we fucking lost all our money. It was a total disaster.
Yeah.
And we also hired a very expensive marketing firm to help do the marketing.
Yeah.
And that was the biggest lesson I ever learned, right? The hardest way was, and I got into a lot of debt, was first, you'd never outsource your marketing.
Right.
Second, you never, ever do anything without understanding marketing. because 90% of everything we do is marketing, all right? Even like trying to convince your friend to go to see a movie at cinema is marketing, right? And third thing is fucking learn all the marketing yourself first before you hire anyone.
Yeah.
And fourth thing is really, if you're going to do a business, if you're going to do anything in the world, right, you need to think in terms of business, the way the world works. Money is a source of energy, right? And it is a tool to you to be creative and to be able to survive. You need some money, right? And then the more money you have, the more you can help other people survive and have more fun and do more things and thrive, right, in the world. So I've never had any bad understanding of, I've never thought business was a bad thing. I think business is a fucking awesome thing. And
it's a necessary thing, even if you don't like it. This is how the world works, so you better fucking know it.
It's a necessary thing, right? So I wouldn't even say it's a necessary evil. I think it's a necessary good. You know, it's a great thing. It empowers people to be stronger. And I think there is a problem in England where, because it's still kind of imperialistic kind of culture, where people are very happy being employees, but they're not as well. They love to moan about having a job. And I hated having a job, and I fucking want to do everything I can to get out of that so that I could do something else. And people have this bad perspective of anyone who does marketing. Americans have a very different approach. Americans, they're all about selling and things like that and marketing. So they understand it. They love buying stuff. England is still traumatized for some reason about marketing, or even though they're being marketed all the time. And they're buying stuff all the time. They still want it. So, you know, I've got this real I don't give a fuck attitude about that. But what I did really learn was marketing to the next level, because before I did anything, right? Anything in terms of trying to reach people with what I did, I cured myself of chronic illness, right? I could really help people. I was like, no. Before I even get out there to start helping people and building a business out of this, I'm going to learn marketing to a level which is going to allow me to be an unstoppable force in the world. Because I'm going against the pharmaceutical companies who have massive marketing budgets. I'm going up against like the conditioning that is created by doctors, by pharmacists, by the educational system. I have to be fucking really good to reach as many people, to go up against these forces that will really understand this from another level, right? So I put all my effort into doing it. I read a book called The 4-Hour Work Week, which was a huge...
Tim Ferriss, yeah.
Tim Ferriss, I really recommend. It's a stepping stone, it's a first thing.
Yeah. But
then I really started to get deep into this, and I realized that all the people out there who are really successful, Tony Robbins, people like that, Deepak Chopra, they're just amazing marketers. Marketers are people who know how to deliver an idea or a message or a product or service to the right audience, to the people that need it the most. And when you look at marketing like that, then it actually becomes easy.
Yeah.
And now we have the Facebook. We have Facebook. You don't need to plaster the world with posters. And we can do things digitally. We don't have to take from the environment. We can do things very at scale. Google's incredible. And I followed a company called Mind Valley. Mind Valley are amazing. It's also an Indian guy, Vishen, and he really inspired me. In fact, I just copied all their stuff. Now I'm creating a course with Mind Valley. I have Mind Valley X team working with me. I'm part of their community. We work very close together, and he's a friend and stuff. So I've grown up now in the last 10 years. I mean, Marissa Peer, who's a very famous hypnotherapist, her husband works with me. He's my business partner, and he's made an amazing online school with Marissa Peer, which is a very respected hypnotherapy technique, RTT, which has helped millions of people around the world now.
Yeah.
And he always said to me, like, learn. You need to either partner with a person who's good at business to get what you do out there, or learning yourself. And he has always been my mentor.
Niraj, this is one of my favorite subjects, but unfortunately we need to wrap up. I point listeners to the episodes by Mark Silver and Tad Hargrave on conscious marketing as well. This is a big part of, I think, weakness for a lot of people in our community is something I'm really obsessed with, because the conference, all the other things I do just won't happen unless they have good marketing.
There you go.
I feel like I've met a bit of a kindred spirit today, mate. So I'd love to chat to you again, maybe privately about some of this stuff as well. It feels like I'm really impressed with what you're doing. I like what you've made of it. Where do people find out more? Where should they go?
Yeah, go to somabreath.com. We have an amazing community. You can go to our Facebook group, Soma Breath. You can sign up for free there, get a bunch of free training. We also have instructor training. We have a 21-day journey, which is life-changing, but the instructor training is for people who want to take our techniques and use them, for their own clients. And we also teach stuff like marketing and how to get your message out there. And, we're pretty good at it. We can be better, but we have such good people in our team now that we are really going into that side. Because I've seen that that's one of the biggest problems for facilitators. Yeah, is this. So I'd love to talk to you more about that too.
Great. Let's set up a second call probably after we end here. But thank you so much. I think really wide-ranging one today, really juicy, lots of stuff there. So I'm wishing you all the best. I'm going to extend an official invite to the Embodiment Conference to you as well, if you want to join us for that. And just for today, thanks so much for coming on.
Amazing, mate.
Some ways to get more, to give back, and to get more involved now. So the biggest request I have would be to share the podcast with your friends, people that you think would really enjoy it. Email it to them, put it on your social media, tell them about it, old school. Really appreciate that. Equally, if you want to support us financially, you can go to Patreon. That's patreon.com/embodiment podcast and give us $1 an episode. And I'd say they're well worth $1. So that's less than £1 if you're in UK-ish. So please go there. On the embodifacilitator.com website is where this is hosted. Most people I think listen to for iTunes. iTunes, we'd certainly appreciate a review. The way iTunes works means that a review means more people will find it. iTunes regards it as more important for searches. So even a couple of sentences review really does help as a little thank you to us. And if you want to go to embodifacilitator.com, you can see the actual, links to the sites. There's comments on there. The Facebook group tends to be where people discuss things. So if you go to put in the Embodiment Podcast into Facebook, there's a page which is relatively quiet and a group which does have some discussion on. So I will reply to things personally there. So also on the embodifacilitator.com website, there's all sorts of freebies there. There's videos, there's free ebooks, there's ebooks you can buy. And of course, there's our newsletter list. If you want to stay in touch and learn about things like the Embodied Facilitator course and our next Embodied Yoga Principles teacher training, then go to that website and you'll see a little pop-up and you can get the newsletter through there. Okay, so I think they're the main ones. Tell your friends, pay us some money on Patreon, give us a review on iTunes, send us your email if you want to be on the newsletter list, and get involved on the Facebook there. Bit long. Pick whatever you like that works for you.